All right, so for the topic of this debate, it's going to be Neppten Season 2, Droll Season 2, both in their Chaos Match forms. As in for the criteria is pretty simple, it's just the major football categories, as in dribbling, shooting, defense, and stuff like other categories such as playmaking, chance creations, basic stuff like that, intelligence, but only in that spectrum. For the rules of this debate, it's just pretty basic as well. Just remain cordial. We have a fallacy limit of 2, so if you commit 3, it's an auto concession, and there's not going to be any time rules or any limits. All right, so I guess I'll start since I have much more stuff to talk about, presumably. So I'll start with this. I'll start with AP, right? So for premise 1, it's breaking heaven's times and establishing universe as an exceptional, near inconceivable feat during this time period, right? So during midway through season 2. Premise 2, Neppten broke through heaven's time not once but twice. Premise 3, this feat provoked visible shock from Byron, Bobby, Mark, and Jude. Characters whose reactions serve as an in-universe barometer for exceptional skill. Premise 4, Gazelle is a character with an established bias against prominent players, which binds Neppten's via his affiliation to the team. He still praised the feat as impressive in general terms, not merely impressive for prominent players. Premise 5, praise from a biased evaluator that exceeds the bounds of that bias is stronger evidence of objective merit than praise from a neutral or favorable for fuck's sakes evaluator, since it overcomes a built-in tendency towards hard judgment. So, how do I say this? Getting praise, like for example, Axel getting praise from the Murdoch brothers, would be more impressive than I guess Mark getting praise from Darren, if that makes any sense to you. For conclusion 1, right? Therefore, Neppten's AP is exceptional, even by standard designed to be unfavorable to him, establishing his AP superiority over Droll, for whom no comparable feat is presented, and it would be your burden of proof if you use feat from Diamond Dust and apply it to the chaos matches, such as him being able to break Jax the wall or Tori's the tower AP wise. You need to until there was a proportional growth between the two parties, right? So between Droll and Jack and Tori, you need to prove there was a proportional growth, which we know both of them grew. Both parties actually grew, such as stated by the king. Literally says they powered up just in one day, and then also Torch's previous statement when Raymond was looking for Axel, saying they're probably still getting stronger after tiffing with your team referring to Genesis in their match when they lost like 20-0. It's also stated that indeed Droll did surpass his limits. It was stated. Let me just go pick it up. What is this? If you have the statement that I'm looking for, oh no, never mind. I found it. I think it was Willie that says this. Hey, he's completely different from before. When Nelly herself just emphasizes on his speed only, right? So there was no real indicator on his AP growing. This is not an argument from silence. It is simply an argument that you cannot define how much his AP grew. That he grew proportional to that of Jax's or Tori's or Bobby's, whatever. It is unquantifiable. He simply got unquantifiably stronger, right? Moving on to argument 2, which is dribbling and reaction speed. P1, a valid way to compare two players is to benchmark their performance against shared opponents under similar or equivalent conditions. P2, mark functions as a shared benchmark in equivalent position circumstances. Neppten successfully passed the torch for an assist while Droll was dispossessed. P3, Neppten Droll passed Jude and Eric on multiple occasions. And for P4, in one of those occasions, Eric used his Asatsu technique, Flame Dance, indicating reasonable and repeatable technique-backed success rather than a one-off. P5, by contrast, Droll was dispossessed by both Mark and Hurley. P6, Hurley is established as a non-proficient tackler, meaning Droll losing the ball to him reflects poorly on Droll's ball control specifically, rather than being explained about by opponent skill. C2, therefore, on the shared benchmark comparison, Neppten consistently retains and progresses the ball against opposition that dispossess Droll, establishing Neppten's dribbling and ball control superiority. Right, from C1 and C2, Neppten outperforms Droll in AP and dribbling, two core technical categories via both direct feats and shared opponent benchmarking, supporting the broad claim that Neppten is the better player. As for the side notes, any negative actions
Sorry,
that no, go on, go
can
on,
you
go on.
jump in? Can you repeat? You just said it. Can you repeat the point when you said that uh, Neppten? You said something about physical and Neppten being the overall better player. I think.
Oh yeah, it's the general conclusion. Neppten outperforms Droll in AP and dribbling, two core technical categories, via both direct feats and shared opponent benchmarking, supporting the broader claim that Neppten is the better player. I didn't
Due
mention
to due
physicality.
to
I think that's more
AP
relative. Yeah, due to
due to
AP
A
and superior dribbling and reaction slash combat speed. Because I don't hold, that Droll or Neppten either have superiority in categories such as shooting or goal scoring, nor do I think they have a substantial gap or like a substantial advantage in stuff like intelligence or battle IQ. No, in this game IQ. The only I would somewhat edge it to Neppten via his analysis of Flame Dance, which he did a full-on analysis and knew how to counteract the movements of the flames in less than a full second, compared to Droll's alleged, lack of feet. So I would edge it to Neppten there. And I don't think Droll's hypothetical slight edge in defense would be enough to clear the gap in overall skill. And even then, I would have contentions on Droll actually having a substantial gap, such as his probably the best thing you could appeal to would be appealing to the fact that he has frozen steel. Yes, yet he's only using frozen steel in the chaos match with off guarding Bobby, which is also not a permanent dribbler. So I guess there's that. So
wait,
go on, go on.
how was he off guarded, Bobby?
You could see by his reactions. I think if I remember correctly, it was Mark passed to Bobby, and then Bobby looked back, and then he saw Droll coming, and then he literally does has like a visible gasp, and then it immediately cuts off to frozen steel.
Yeah,
So he go on.
so you could argue that Bobby was already perceiving Droll. He just couldn't react in time because
Hey,
I think in order for him to be, let's say, Bobby off guarded, let's say it would be like sneak attack by Droll, like Droll tackling Bobby before he could even perceive him or just like move or turn around.
yeah, I guess you could argue that it does fit the criteria because Droll himself came from Bobby's back, and it's already implied that he was already in motion prior to Bobby turning his back on. That's why he did a visible gasp and immediately cuts off to the technique itself. I can try to get. I don't know if I have the scans right here. Let me see. Just 1 second. Okay, no, I don't have it, but I'll just. If you want, you can move on to your point while I just search up for the scan right here. Should be only a couple
Okay,
seconds.
just a second. And actually, can I address some of your points before I move to mine?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, so the point when you said that I don't know if you say it exactly, but you said something about Diamond Dust me not being able to like say let's say that Droll has feats in Diamond Dust and then apply them to Chaos.
Mm-hmm.
I th-
Then
I
yeah, and
I
referring
think
to AP only with
oh,
Waterville.
okay, so my premise is that Joel's Isatsu versatility, so his defensive Isatsu, Frozen Steel, and Waterville as a dribbling Isatsu, and consistent mentality arms throughout the game. We know that Chaos Team does get uh, armed by, let's say, Torts and Gazelle when they score the goal against Darren. The Natakas team is able to play as just as one. And there are, even in the beginning when there are statements from Willie, Nelly, and Tori that Joel was too fast when he dribbled past Bobby and Jack when he tackled Tori. And
Hmm.
I would give Droll uh, dribbling purely because he has better inverse to defenders like Bobby and Jack. When these defenders they were armed during the match against Chaos Team when Mark used Megaton head to clear the torches shot. And then there is a statement from, I think, the commentator saying that Mark's clearance gave the defensive players enough like energy, you know, like
Hmm.
motivation to keep going and just clear all the attacks from Chaos Team.
Hmm.
And and there is like a pattern of mentality arms by Chaos Team that again, Joel having better even inverse to those defenders in terms of dribbling, but Neppten only being able to, let's say, dribble past Jude and comprehend how flame dance works. I don't think that was still that's enough to say that he takes dribbling over Joel because they just established that those defenders that Joel has inverse to have better defensive fates than Eric and Jude. And if we follow the that pattern of how both teams kept amping themselves, if that makes sense, you see that at the end of the game, Chaos Team was amped as a whole. So you can argue that that same draw will be able to replicate those feats that he had against Bobby or Jack. And you could also argue things like probably again travel speed because of that statement from Nelly and Willie.
Hmm.
You could also argue that he's fast enough that Jack or Bobby weren't able to like use a defensive statue to stop him.
Hmm.
Whereas obviously you have Eric using flame dance, and well you could argue that Neptune couldn't just like blitz Eric, allowing Eric to use flame dance, even though Neptune did uh, dodge or reacted to the Isatsu technique. So in terms of
Hmm.
dribbling things like speed, I would give those points to Droll. And well, you said it yourself. About defensive wise, I think you said that Droll would take the point because of Frozen Steel.
I said that you could appeal to that, for higher versatility, but I would have contentions
Not
to it
for
since it's
overall
only
player,
used.
just one category.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, no, for generally for defense only. I
yeah,
think
yeah.
that his only feat with Frozen Steel, which was debatably off-guarding Bobby, does not meet the criteria for Neppten, for example, actually um, dispossessing regular Bobby, which is regular slide tackle. Or you could also have the contentions for how it operates when he broke out of Heaven's Time, but you could also argue that, breaking out of Heaven's Time and actually stealing the ball from him twice would be a greater defensive feat than randomly stealing a ball from, a base form of any of Raymond's players. Since, up until this point, Heaven's Time is still breaking Heaven's Time is still considered to be an inconceivable event.
Okay, I can address the Heaven's Time part. I just want to uh look at the time frame where Droll tackles Bobby off guard.
Hmm. It's
I mean, I can see
in.
the image.
I
I
sent I
just
sent
want
a
to see
scan in the channel, but it happens in. I'm gonna see if I can
episode
forward this video.
58.
57, 57. Let me send this here from the other server. I think I forwarded the video. It's in minutes. Let me do this up quickly.
Sorry.
It's in around, I think it's 20 minutes and oh, fuck, 20 minutes and around like 40 seconds. Yeah, 20 minutes and 37, 37 to 36 seconds. Also, just to address while you go for it, I'd like to address what you said about his dribbling. I don't necessarily agree. I think you're misusing misusing the feats and the what was actually stated. I do not hold dribbling past Jack or Bobby to be a greater feat than dribbling past either Eric or Jude. And it's a in a misrepresentation of what the statements actually say. Nothing in the statement say that their overall defensive ability was amped. It's only shown and it's only implied. There's an emphasis on their shot blocking ability. That's why they go on a sequence of, for example, Jack using the wall to stop a heat, and Tori using the tower, if I'm not mistaken, to stop Neppten. No, it was actually Scotty. There's no emphasis on overall defensive capability. That would be your burden to prove that it refers to all of it, rather than just shot blocking capability, which is the only emphasis needed. And this is derived directly from an actual clash, from a shot blocking feat, which was Mark stopping Torch, if I'm not mistaken. So I do not think this what you say entails dribbling superiority over Droll. And you could also still argue, you mentioned something, I could be mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong. Regarding Flame Dance, you said that Neppten was not able to blitz Eric, which is why he was able to use it. Is that it?
No, so I did say that obviously Eric had like time to use flame dance, and we obviously see him
Mm-hmm.
using the Isatsu technique. But I did acknowledge that even then Neptune was able to get past it.
Yeah,
But
and even then,
so
you could also argue that, no, not argue, it's explicitly shown that after that interaction, he dribbles past Eric again, he just blitzes him. The most that Eric can actually do is track him with his eyes, but you can see that physically his body's not actually reacting, he's just getting blitzed. He's just able to perceive him. I'm gonna send the image right here.
so how so you obviously hold dribbling past Jude and Eric is better than dribbling past
Yeah,
Jack.
because they have previous inverse even before during the Diamond Dust and Epsilon Chi match. They just have much better inverse in terms of tackling than compared to Bobby and Jack, which are nearly featless in the entire season in terms of tackling feats.
Is that is your point due to let's say growth, like feet
I would not say
growth?
I would not
Over the
argue
match?
that is like I wouldn't necessarily argue there's proportional growth from their past feats. I would just argue that there's no actual basis to to how do I say this? I don't think there's any actual basis to give any of these points to Bobby and Jack, having defensive superiority of Jude and Eric, simply because not only is the statement misused from their defensive capabilities being amped, but I just think that even if there was a proportional growth for all players, nothing would entail that they're actually superior defensively in terms of tackling to Jude and Eric.
So in terms of dribbling, how would you scale Neptune's feet against Eric and Jude above uh oh, sorry, I'm not repeating myself. So sorry, let me just go back to the to the point I
Yeah,
said
yeah, sure,
about
Fran.
the amped throughout the game. So obviously
Mhm.
we don't, even though we don't see Droll dribbling like having dribbling feet during last those are situations during the chaos team. The I'm just appealing to the pattern in the entire within the entire game, which denotes that not Neptune, sorry, that Droll could replicate those dribbles against Jack and Bobby. So my question is, how would you like, because you claim that Neptune having a dribbling feat against Eric and Jude would be above one from Droll, but how would that be the case? How would that feat be greater than
Because
Droll?
again, they have overall established to have better inverse in terms of tackling prior to this match, and there's no actual basis to entail that Bobby or Jack would even be on their level prior to this. And if you actually go back, it's the statement that you're referring to that they got amped after seeing what Mark stopping Atomic Flare. Nothing in the statement actually entails or even implies that they got an amp involving stuff like tackling or a reaction in combat speed. It's just referring to their shot stopping abilities because the statement itself is derived from witnessing a domain clash, which was shot blocking feed. Right? It literally says the Jack literally says, "I will not let." Hold on, let me go back. I won't let them score another point. And then the only interaction that we see from that are or him using the wall, Scotty using rolling force, and then what we actually see after this, if correct me if I'm wrong, this is after it. Droll is actually gets dispossessed by Hurley, which is again established to not actually be proficient in any sort of drill in any sort of defensive capability besides um, quote unquote shot blocking and goal line clearances. As even after the Epsilon Chi match when Axel went back to the team, even someone such as Bobby, which also had no not rational basis, had no established dribbling inverse, literally ran circles around Hurley right after the match. So yeah, I don't really don't think I don't see this entailing any superiority for Droll over Neppten in dribbling categories. And I would actually argue that him getting dispossessed by Hurley would actually be an anti-feat. And we also have the direct. We can also use the direct interaction they had with Mark as the actual benchmark to see how they actually perform, such as Mark easily being able to dispossess and react to Droll's movements while he was literally incapable of reacting to uh, Neptune's micro movements, which allowed them to pass and somewhat win the quote unquote duel. The commentator literally says that Neppten has beaten Mark and that specific action.
When he passed the torch, you mean?
Yeah, yeah.
But with that, so how would you categorize that feat? Like, I would say just
I
reaction
wouldn't
speed.
tell it was. I would say it is a superiority over the role in terms of reaction and combat speed. I wouldn't necessarily say it was superiority in travel speed. I don't think anything entails that. Nor do I think there's any argument that entails otherwise that Droll has better travel speed. So I think there's no more relevant in it, and nothing in that interaction entails travel speed. I think it's just a matter of reaction and combat speed because you can literally see Neppten engaging in the past before Mark even reacts to it, even turns around to see it.
So,
Well, go on.
yeah, what we say.
No, just go on. Yeah, go on. I was not going to say anything.
So yeah, so just that one last point about dribbling. So going back to the point where you said that I think you said I'm not sure, but you said that you don't see Jack or Bobby, the players that dribble past, like them having like 1v1 ball stealing feats
Mm-hmm.
above Eric or Jude.
Mm-hmm.
You said that. Uh,
Yeah.
that's good. So, so what's the basis if you said it before? I just want to hear it again.
The basis that I have for Jude and Eric having better,
Mostly,
uh,
yeah.
yeah, better tackling universe compared to them is that they actually have previous inverse to previous teams. They have inverse to Diamond Dust. They have inverse to Epsilon Chi. Eric has inverse all the way back to Gemini Storm, the third match. Meanwhile, we literally don't have anything for, well, not anything that we recall, or that I personally recall,
For
of them
Bobby
actually winning a
in
tackle. Bobby
for
and
Bobby
who's that?
in well, you said Epsilon Chi, so I think
Yeah.
Bobby is able to steal the ball from what's his name again? Zell using volcanic cut. I think
Oh
that's
yeah,
also
yeah, yeah. I think
I'm
so.
not sure
But again, Zell
if
is also another character that has no inverse, dribbling wise. He only has even in his scaling, he only has scaling in terms of AP. So I don't. Again, I don't. And again, you would also have to concede that he's narratively outscaled by Diamond Dust players, anyways, because of the rank and how it's treated in Yellow's Academy. And obviously, Eric and Jude have inverse to Diamond Dust, both of them. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't think Jack has any inverse at all throughout the entire season.
I mean, you could argue things like the travel speed, like let's say being able to react to shots before blocking them. Jack is let's say Jack during someone does match out, and he also does it during the match against Chaos. And when I said about the mentality amps and how it works during Chaos team, I did say that Droll's at least travel speed, if not dribbling, would account to something. So in terms
Oh
of
yeah, I also think that's a misuse of the actual.
reaction,
I think that's a I would say that as an actual misrepresentation of what the match is. I don't think they get amped in any way from from their emotional state. I think they were actually nerfed from the beginning of the match. Mostly Neppten because we actually see his prejudice against Diamond Dust players, and then that prejudice spreads around the entire team to the point where I'm actually going to send this scan. I mean, in the channel, we actually see the prejudice spreading across the players themselves. With Gawker, the defender from Diamond Dust, the big one, he literally says prominence isn't much either. After Gawker, no, not Gawker, Bomber literally gets dribbled past by Mark, and then Mark scores. And then it cuts out to a shot of every single player being divided except for Torch and Gazelle. We literally see Neppten with Heat and the small girl in one group. You see Gawker alone. We see the prominence keeper alone. We see Droll and Gawker together, and the other two Diamondist girls together. So I think that the prejudice spread around, which is why they were panicking, and they were stated to be panicking. They were falling apart, and then when Torch and Gazelle actually scored with Fire Blizzard, that's when the conflict started to dissipate for vast majority of the players except for Neppten, because we literally see him literally shaking with anger after they actually scored a game because he thinks it's atrocious that Providence had to team up with Diamond Dust. And then obviously Droll sees this and says we can afford to lose this match. And then he passes to Droll, not Droll, Neppten, I mean. And then he still manages, even while mentally conflicted, he still manages to blitz Jude and Eric in the same interaction. And then he literally has an internal monologue saying, even without Diamond Dust, prominence can still, then three quotation marks. And then he is forced to pass to that girl, which I do not recall the name, though the masked girl, and says, bring it in, which is when he finally resolved his conflict. And when it's finally stated that Raymond literally has no win cons anymore because they are not subjective to any type of mental conflicts. So I do not think that they were amped in any way. I think they were just nerfed mentally, with obviously a huge emphasis on Neppten. Since he was nerfed from the beginning, and even in the halftime discussion, Jude literally says that midfielder is completely ignoring Diamond Dust. He's probably trying to show that they can win with just prominence. So I think even throughout the entire match, Neppten retains his superiority even while mentally conflict. I think it would just be a full-on stomp if it was not conflicted from the start. So I don't think they had any emotional lamp throughout the match, except for maybe Tort and Gazelle, out of their desire to complete to win and to show that they deserve the title of Genesis. But besides them, I don't think you can make a case that anyone else was emotionally amped. If anything, they were just all
you
mentally
know.
conflicted.
So you don't agree that everyone in the Chaos team was amped after that shot from Gazelle and Torch?
No, I think they were simply returned back to base because I don't think nothing here shows, or there's no statement, nothing that indicates that they have increased the capabilities. It simply says it simply, how do I say this? They simply counteracted Jude's plan, which was to time the rhythm and to break them apart. Now that he literally cannot do this because there's no weak point anymore. It's stated that they have no win cons anymore because they can simply can't pick on Neppten again to make a mistake, or to pass to, for example, Heat instead of passing to Droll or the Masked Girl out of prejudice. They don't have that weak point to exploit anymore. So that's why they have no win con. That's not because they inherently got stronger. I don't think anything entails that beyond the standard statement that Torch gives us prior to in like earlier in the season that everyone gets stronger after playing. But no, I don't think there anything in here entails that there was a emotional
Be-
amp
So because there
involved.
isn't any explicit statements saying so,
Yeah, I'm not saying that there. No, I'm not saying that there isn't.
just
That
asking.
there isn't any emotional amp because there's no evidence. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that you do not have an actual basis to establish that there was an emotional lamp because there's no basis, right? Yeah, I'm saying that you cannot fulfill your burden of proof.
Oh, but we see throughout the game that when someone like, let's say, Mark, or even the captains from the Chaos team, we see that when they do a special move, the players are starting to like perform better than before, and that symbolizes growth.
Yeah, symbolize the growth, but yeah, that's not then doesn't automatically entail it's an emotional lamp. So it can simply just be a passive growth, such
Like,
as
well,
torch.
mentality.
Wait, what? Say that again.
That's it. No, never mind. It's just, I just literally, it's just literally like an amp. Just let's say like just growth. Can you just categorize it as growth?
Yeah, you can just, yeah, I guess we can just
Or
categorize it as growth, yeah. But there was no necessarily explicit emotional lamp, nor not one that you can prove, anyways. And obviously, we have evidence that Neppten was nerfed from the beginning, and he still has. At the very least, you still have to concede that this is somewhat relative to Droll, while heavily mentally conflicted. So
I mean, the emotional amp that you said that there isn't, that there's something just growth. The emotional would be them just like neglecting each other. That's literally an emotion. And when they stop using that, those thoughts, which is again is an emotion, they they grow. So they stop using a that type of emotion, and then they grow through those feats from both captains of the chaos team, and that's
again, I
how.
would not necessarily categorize it as growth. I would simply categorize it as returning to base. Sure, emotions and overall feelings can amp one like can amp each other, but also negative ones can also explicitly neglect and reduce your overall performance. So, such as Sean is a primary example. His literally mental conflict literally makes him below the base of Raymond in general, literally below Sue. So again, I would not categorize this as growth. I don't think anything suggests that this should be categorized as growth. I think it should just literally just be a debuff to their base stats. And when the prejudice against the members of the opposite team stops, then they return back to base because they're not getting debuffed or nerfed from those negative emotions, which is impairing their cognitive abilities.
Do you want to move on with AP?
No, well, wait, what? AP?
AP, yeah. So
Yeah. What would be your contentions?
I think you saying that Delta has better IP due to Heaven's Time,
Mm-hmm.
right? So let me just send the description of Heaven's Time, and I'll explain the
All right.
contention. I'll just send the English version. Because I just sent it, even because I think the feat that Neptune has is it's more like kind of like a type of resistance to Heaven's Time, since Heaven's
Mm-hmm.
Time is literally described to be when it's so capable of stopping time. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how you would substantiate that it fully is, let's say, scales to AP.
Well, I would say that even though this is a time step ability, just this is everything related to Inazuma 11. All Hisatsus relate to AP in some sense. So I would not necessarily say this is a time resistance thing, even though you could argue it's a time resistance thing derived from AP. right? So I think he's just naturally, yeah, I think he's naturally resisting it through his raw AP, because if it was a regular time resistance, then he would simply just not be affected, be affected at all during the startup of it. But we literally see him getting caught up and frozen in time during its start, and then he actually breaks out of it because he's resisting it with AP. Having a regular time resistance would entail that he is not affected in general to set ability. So I think he's just simply resisting it through AP, just as many people can bypass several Hassasas simply by just running or barging through it, because they just simply outscale that projected AP just substantially, just by huge margins. They're on completely different tier, which is exactly what I think is happening um, with Neppten. If it was a regular time resistance ability, then he would not be affected in the startup at all.
But you could argue that at the beginning he might be affected, but then when he's getting affected, he's just like trying to get rid of the effect, and then he does so at the end. So
Yes.
even though at the very beginning it's not like immunity, because immunity would entail that he cannot be affected by any means. But because
Mm-hmm.
he then can bypass that effect after, let's say, 3 seconds, you could argue a certain amount of resistance, which is based on axe. And I do know that Isatsu techniques in the verse, they do require AP, regardless them of the Isatsu being axe. But because I'm putting to the description of the Isatsu,
Mm-hmm.
it's mostly going to be axe rather than like fully AP, because I don't think Byron can extrapolate all of his AP through only that Isatsu dribbling
Mm-hmm.
technique.
Right, but you still have to see that there is a correlation between disability and AP, which again, sure, it's a hacks ability. Time stopping is a hacks ability, but it can still be a hacks dependent on AP, such as both of us can have. For example, you can have a type 1 time stop ability, I can have type 2, and my ability is going to supersede yours, right? Because there is a difference in its ontology. And in ISM 11, Sato's ontology are not purely, but there's a high correlation with overall AP, right? I think literally nothing here entails that, Neppin has a natural or unnatural, depending if you have the aerial cursor or not, the resistance to time stop. Again, I think it's literally just explicitly shown that it is a superiority in AP, right? That's how you naturally overcome or just fully negate Hisatsu's in Inazuma 11. You just have, um, you literally just outscale, the minimal threshold to overwhelm set ability. And I think that's exactly what Neptune is doing. Because again, if he was resisting the hacks part of it, then it does not matter what AP you have, because as long as it's in the same ontological existence, like in the same spatial temporal plane of existence, it would not affect him at all, right? So I think he's resisting the AP side of it through his own AP, which was something that was indeed considered in universe to be something inconceivable up until this time.
Mm, Good point.
Mm.
So what do we address? AP, travel speed, dribbling. We could say
Again, you could go
defense.
for defense, but again, not I showed I've seen the video itself with the timestamp when
Yeah,
uh
we probably got off guarded, but still, I think him with Frozen, him having that the Satsu Frozen still will giving more the upper hands of him.
again, yeah, you could
Uh,
argue for versatility,
but I
but
know that it's not necessarily that doesn't necessarily mean he's overall better than Neptune just because of defense.
hmm
Uh,
but again, even if I conceded on the fact that he was not off guarded, why necessarily would this entail that he is better defensively than Neptune? Because he was able to use Frozen Steel on Bobby, even though I have a scan, I'm gonna send it in the chat as well, of Neppten literally doing the exact same thing, stealing the ball in the exact same way with no Hasatsu. So this is literally just at best from this feat alone, you would just be putting Droll with Frozen Steel on the exact same level as Neppten with nothing.
I just, oh yeah, I know what you mean, but I think he would just get that upper hand because of the Satsu. I know in terms, you could argue, let's say raw ability to raw power without Satsu, it would go to Neppten without them both base to base, no Satsu whatsoever. So Neppten would get that point.
And again,
Um,
even though it is a Hasatsu, I still think that it has a major flaw in terms of the Hasatsu itself, which is actually shown by both Axel and Byron that you can simply just jump or do a tempo change to avoid the Hasatsu entirely. So again, I literally don't see this actually working. Again, I don't think anything would entail that, for example, Droll would be able to dispossess someone such as Axel or Byron using Frozen Steel the exact same way that literally individually Droll and not Droll, Gawker and Bomber literally cannot affect them or actually hit them individually with said abilities. So I think this that even then, even though this is a Satsu itself, and you could argue some to have some form of versatility, I still think it's completely irrelevant. Again, I don't think this offers any substantial advantage because again it has this major flaw that even in this match uh, it's exploited by two completely different people, and it's fundamentally the exact same thing as a slight tackle, just a slightly more powered up form. So
I
I don't
think
think
when we
this
talk
offers
about,
any substantial gap. I don't think this
I
offers
think
any
when we,
substantial
yeah.
edge. Go on.
Yeah, so back to the point where when you said that Neptune would be superior in terms of offensive capabilities through speed, dribbling, and even passing. I'm not sure. Um,
No,
I don't think if
I think passing they're relative because they have just exact same feats, and the only thing that you can point out is that Droll is more consistent in passing, but again that's because the only times where Neptune actually fails a pass, that's when it's explicitly shown that his mental conflict is in full effect. So again, you would be arguing consistency over quality, which it's a Nakmara fallacy. It would just be a category error as well to entail that Neptune, no, not Neptune, Droll would have a better hierarchical value and passing because of quantity, right? I think it's completely two different categories, so I think it would be fallacious in anyways.
when did I
So I think
say
it's just
when did
no. I didn't say you say it. I said if you were to say something, it would be fallacious.
oh okay. What was I going to say? So yeah, back to the point about the overall player. Because you obviously you disagree that that Droll has better speed and dribbling and overall offensive capabilities than Neptune. And also, I think we can both agree that Droll is, let's say, better at defending. I'm not saying that that would make him overall best player, but I think when you compare what he can offer as a defender w- with his defensive Isatsu, and even though you might think that Neptune has better offensive feet, I don't think that there is like a massive gap between Droll and Neppten in terms of offensive capabilities. So I think if you fuse those things together, back to my premise when I said that, uh, sorry, my premise, uh, draws with his Satsus and the consistent arms throughout the game would make him better than Neptune overall. And when we talk about AP, him bypassing Byron Seven's time, I don't see how that would add something to Neptune in terms of him because he only has that win con against Byron. It doesn't necessitate for him to be better than Droll, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Okay, so let
And
me
also
ask you
when
this.
we
Let
talk,
me just ask you this hypothetical. Do you agree that, for example, um, Evan's time is ontologically superior to something such as, Todd's dash accelerator that he used back in like against the Terrence team?
and how's that relevant?
Just I just answered the question. I'll show you why it's relevant. Do you think
Wait,
Heaven's Time is
so who has
superior
more?
ontologically?
Who has which is ontologically better, Heaven's Time or the
Yeah, or let
Itsatsuba?
me ask you this: what do you think is better ontologically, Heaven's Time or Illusion Ball from Jude? What do you think is better
Ontologically, I
ontologically?
would
Or ontologically superior, AP wise, whatever.
say Heaven's Time.
Right. So, and if you do not see any advantage football wise that Neppten could have with AP, well, we literally see him actually negating Hisatsu's VAP alone. So, if he can overpower Hisatsu VAP alone, why necessarily couldn't he overpower other Hisatsu's VAP alone that are ontologically inferior to Heaven's Time, that are part of Raymond's kit, which would aid him not only in defensive but also in dribbling wise?
Against players such as Jules or
Such
anyone
as
else.
Jude, yeah, Jude, Eric, whatever, whoever has a defensive Asatsu targeted for dribbling past or tackling someone.
So that would include Jack and Bobby too, ontologically speaking.
Well, yeah, I guess you could argue that if you want to argue
Yeah, I'm just asking.
for if you want to argue for something such as Heaven's Time is superior to the Wall, Volcano Cut, and or Tower. Again, if we could potentially debate that. I think we could debate that. Um, But for example, if you were to concede on that, then yeah, literally nothing entails that. Neptune would not be able to replicate the exact same thing had Jack, Bobby, Scotty, or Tori used their Hasatus on him. Do you get what I mean? Or
Yeah, I do. Actually, I do. Yeah.
you just went silent for a little bit.
You know why I went silent?
Anyway, do you concede on that point, or is there anything else you want to talk about? Again, I don't think there's much
Um,
else to talk about.
to be
You
honest,
know,
I don't. Let me just
go on.
scroll through the categories, just to see if there's something I could talk about. I guess we could just talk about physical. I think that's the only thing that we haven't touched on. Because I think we talked about
Okay, so for
on
physical, again,
defense,
there's
passing,
no, there's I don't
and
from what I remember, there's no direct like physical feat that they have against any players throughout the match. But again, if you concede on the AP point, you do have to concede on physical as well because physical strength is derived, not derived, it's classified as the ability to exert force to an external resistance. So if you literally have
so how
greater
would that
AP, go on.
yeah how would that be relevant to Neppten, let's say bypassing Heaven's Time through let's say through physical. I know that
Yeah, sure.
a,
Yeah, because his inherent strength can overpower Byron with AP, Byron with Heaven's Time. I mean, so if his innate strength is superior to that of Byron with Heaven's Time, and it's stated as something to be something inconceivable that he actually broke through it, I think that would entail that he has higher physical ability because he overpowered that technique via his innate strength. So I would say that automatically grants him
but I
higher
think there
physical
is a yeah,
ability.
sorry. So I
No, go
think,
on.
but
He's
I
already
think
finished.
yeah, but I think previously you said that I know that again AP is like derives from physical strength you said, but
Hmm.
I think I mean like with contact like let's say lifting strength, if that makes sense, lifting strength and let's
Hmm.
say AP would be two different categories. Like I know that Neptune would overpower Binding Seven's time through AP, but it wouldn't necessarily be through like lifting strength. So like, let's
Hmm.
say having a 1v1 contact shoulder to shoulder, or even making a tackle that would describe like a like that would describe like brute force or just
Hmm.
physical
Okay, for
capability rather.
lifting strength, I guess lifting strength is categorized a little bit differently, but even for stuff such as shoulder tackles, sliding tackles, such as, for example, Axel's tackle back in season one against Jude in the second match against Royal, all that stuff is literally described as exerting force against an external resistance, which exactly binds his feet against Havenstein. So I think that would
which
still
also
grant him.
depends on physical. Sorry,
Yeah, physical strength. Yeah.
I was going to give that point to Droll, but I know that they both kind of lack that specific type of strength during chaos match. But I would reference Droll like in a 1v1. I think shoulder to shoulder to against Byron, and I know
Mm.
that again Diamond does get outscaled by the fates in chaos team, but you could argue that Joel can replicate that same fate through through the same point I said before about the amps that chaos team uh, have throughout the game. And
Yeah,
again,
but yeah,
even though
again, that would be your burden, and they got unquantifiably stronger. So you cannot even argue that Droll compared to Raymond, they grew proportionally to the point where Droll retains his superiority physically. Compared to Jack and Tori when he overwhelmed them back in Diamond Dust, you'd have to prove that these two parties had a proportional growth to where Droll still remains, he still retains his superiority over them. And again, that's an unprovable position. You cannot, actually verify it. So,
but I mean there's some at least something to entail that like to entail that Joel is more likely to take that category rather than Neppten, because the only
mm,
because Neppten again uses AP, which I find it way different to lifting strength during that match against during that match with Chaos Team.
okay,
I mean
why exactly would it be more?
they both
Why exactly?
lack.
Yeah, go on.
No, what were you going to say?
Why exactly would you? What are you basing? Like, for example, you said that it's more likely that Droll takes this category over Neptune. What exactly are you using? Are you using
It's
to
just
base?
referencing the Diamond Dust, and again, I know that they do get outscaled by Chaos Team, but at least that point of reference is relevant when you're comparing both players that are technically fitless during Chaos Team.
Hmm. But
And again,
again,
I
there's
did.
there's obviously the contentions for. Again, you'd have to prove again. I don't want to repeat myself, but you have to prove there was a proportional growth, whatever, whatever. Even though there's also King also stated that they powered up this much in just one day in reference to the Raymond squad in general. And again, it's your burden. I don't think you can prove this. And again, I don't think any of this would entail that it's more likely than not for this to be the case over Y being superior to X, right? I don't think you can prove this in any way. I don't think you can even prove that it's more likely or not that this is the case. And I would still appeal to his feat against Evans' time to deduce to infer that Neppin retains his physical superiority over him. So
think that's everything.
all right. Uh, again, I think it's. I think we could just skip shooting and goal scoring altogether. I think it's completely relevant. They're both feetless in it. Again, for stuff such as chance creation, you also have to concede that Neppten is inherently a better one since, one assist compared to Droll zero, pretty axiomatic. Probably you can also argue the same thing for Neppten in terms of playmaking since Neppten is treated as the designated playmaker of the team, so I don't think there's much to contend there. And I think that's all, really. I think they're both somewhat not featless, but they both lack statements denoting their their overall technical intelligence and game IQ. The only thing that you can probably argue for Neptune having an edge would be again his analysis of the movements of Flame Dance, which would be literally the only basis for Neppten having a higher IQ, or not necessarily IQ, just a slightly higher intelligence index via superior analysis. So I think that's all. Do you have anything else you want to say?
That's everything. Oh, my conclusion.
Oh, sure, whatever. What was your conclusion?
I mean, it's literally just repeating the same thing I said, just in a summary. So what's actually the point?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess there's no point to it really. Again, my conclusion would just be from my previous premises. I'm not gonna read them all together. I'll again begin from conclusion one to conclusion two. This would entail Neppten to be a superior player in overall categories compared to Droll. So if that's all, I guess I can end the recording.